Is there a perfect food when it comes to freeze drying? Is there a food out there that's easily freeze dried that when reconstituted will give you everything you need, nutrition, vitamins, minerals, the whole package? Well, we're going to take a look at that to discover, is there a perfect food? This could be an interesting question and could have problems that go along with it. For example, nuts. Nuts are a great food, packed with protein, has lots of vitamins, lots of minerals, but the problem is not everyone can eat nuts. Some people have a really bad allergy, a reaction when they eat nuts, so nuts could be out. Well, what about dairy? Dairy kind of has the same thing with nuts, lots of protein, lots of calcium, but not everyone can eat dairy because of allergies and preferences, so dairy is out. Well, then comes meats. Meats are great, packed with protein. Well, apparently a lot of people don't like meats, especially if you happen to be vegan, because some people won't eat anything that has a face on it. So meats are out. So this kind of goes back to the same question, is there a perfect food? Well, let's take a look at some other foods that are kind of considered perfect foods. Well, the first one we have are bananas. Bananas are great, lots of potassium, and some people think that banana is the single greatest food there is. Well, with that being said, we can't discount the other perfect foods such as salmon, potatoes, liver, blueberries, sardines, garlic, seaweed, egg yolk, dark chocolate, and my favorite, kale. Well, one option would be to take all these perfect foods and just blend them all together into a delicious milkshake. That would be one way of making a very nutritious meal. So the question is, what would be a perfect food that would have all the calories, and we're looking at about 2,000 daily, would have the nutrients that we need, and not only would be good for men and women, but also for infants. You may have seen in the news lately of a new program called ChatGPT. Well, ChatGPT is basically the end-all, be-all of the internet. Ask ChatGPT is basically the knowledge of the entire internet plus about every book ever written. So I turned to Ask ChatGPT this question: what is the most perfect food that will provide nutrients, calories, vitamins, minerals, and can sustain life? Well, it gave me an answer. Plumpy nut. Now, if you haven't heard of plumpy nut, this is a particular food that's being used quite a bit in some of the African countries such as Somalia, Sudan, Ethiopia, and other developing countries that are having a problem with food supplies and starvation. Plumpy nut is almost a perfect food, and it contains peanuts in the form of peanut butter, sugar, powdered milk, vegetable oil, and a vitamin mineral mixture. When you first look at these ingredients, the first thing that comes to mind is peanuts. Well, aren't a lot of people allergic to peanuts? Well, apparently they are in the developed countries, but in some of the third world countries, they don't have the allergies that we have in this country. And so a lot of these individuals can handle peanuts without a problem. And for freeze dryers, vegetable oil is a problem. So plumpy nut, although as nutritious as it is, may not be a good food for freeze dryers, but there is a variation of plumpy nut that we can freeze dry rather well. But if you're interested in the recipe for plumpy nut or a plumpy nut product, well, here it is. You can go ahead and pause this and take a look at the ingredients and try it for yourself. The biggest problem with this recipe right here, not only is the oil in the peanuts, but it's going to be the additional vegetable oil that is added that makes this recipe extremely hard to freeze dry. So we're going to go ahead and make this recipe plus the alternate recipe and see how it goes. Plumpy nut is an RUTF, which is a ready-to-use therapy food. Now, plumpy nut and products like that are used in countries that are experiencing starvation and really nutritional problems. It's high in calories, lots of protein, and we're going to make some right now. So plumpy nut, or the equivalent of plumpy nut, is pretty simple to make. It has only 4 ingredients. It has 1 cup peanut butter, and then it has 1/2 cup powdered milk. Now this is a killer ingredient. It has 1/4 cup vegetable oil, and that's going to lead to a problem. The last ingredient is 1/4 cup of powdered sugar. So you take this and it's going to come out to be a paste, and it has a 2-year shelf life. It doesn't need to be refrigerated. It doesn't need to be cooked. It's just something that you can eat as is. So this right here is like a plumpy nut. It has just about everything you can think of. Now, one of the other things that they put into this paste is vitamins, some extra vitamins to make sure everything is rounded out. But this particular product can be given to children as young as 6 months, and it's kind of sweet. It's good, and you can, lots of calories, lots of protein. This is plumpy nut, okay? Now I went ahead and made some of this, and I pre-froze it, and I put it in my freeze dryer, and this is right out of the freeze dryer. So this is freeze-dried plumpy nut. Now, a lot of people have problems trying to freeze-dry peanut butter. There is a way to freeze-dry peanut butter, and I have the information on how you can do it. It is possible to freeze-dry peanut butter, not a problem. The problem is that 3rd ingredient, vegetable oil. The problem with this, the recipe, it really can't be freeze-dried. Because of the extra oil, it just becomes a goo, and it just will not freeze dry. That's the problem. There's too much oil in this recipe. Now, plumpy nut has a 2-year shelf life, but then it probably goes bad. But I'm going to share with you my father's recipe. It is very, very similar to plumpy nut, but in order to get his kids and me, I was actually raised on my father's recipe because I was a really finicky eater. And from probably 6 months old, I drank this concoction, which our family calls peanut butter eggnog. So let's make some peanut butter eggnog. This is my father's recipe, but we're going to need a blender. My father's recipe is similar to plumpy nutty in the 3 basic ingredients. Well, the first thing we start off with is 1.5 cups milk. Now, in the other recipe, it calls for 1/2 cup of powdered milk, and this is just going to be regular milk. And then we add 1/4 cup peanut butter. And 2 tablespoons sugar. Now, this is like the traditional recipe for an RUTF, ready to use therapy food. But this is going to be in a liquid state rather than in a solid state, if that makes sense. And this is where my father deviates from the traditional recipe. He then adds a teaspoon of vanilla and 2 pasteurized eggs. Now, when I was a kid growing up, these were just raw eggs, but to keep everything kosher, these eggs are pasteurized, which 2 eggs is basically equal to 1/3 cup. So this is basically my father's recipe. Now, talking to my older brothers and sisters, my father would sometimes put cocoa powder in this to kind of change things up. So this is the basic recipe. You can do with it what you want. Now, this recipe does not have the extra oil that the plumpy nut recipe has. And that's one of the reasons why this can freeze dry where the plumpy nut won't. Voila, peanut butter eggnog. This is peanut butter eggnog that has been freeze dried. It's in a powder that you can, it's a dry powder. The oil from the peanut butter really does not have any effect on this. So the nice thing about this product here is because it's freeze dried, when you reconstitute this, you can make it as thin or as thick as you want. If you want to make it a paste, you can make it a paste. If you want to make it a drink, well, you can make it a drink. So this RUTF, ready to use therapy food, will last a lot longer than the 2-year shelf life. When used with an oxygen absorber, and I would suggest to vacuum pack this, this has a potential of lasting 20 years. And this material here, this food, has just about everything you need to survive. If you want to crush up a vitamin and throw it into it, knock yourself out. It would not be a bad idea. So this is perfect food number 1 that was suggested by ChatGPT. So the next dish we're going to do is a little bit more traditional. Well, I went back to ask ChatGPT something a little bit more specific than my first question, and this is what I asked. I need a recipe that contains all the vitamins, minerals, nutrition, and calories for humans of all ages and to avoid any allergies. Well, it gave me an answer. Rainbow veggie stir fry with quinoa. Well, be careful what you ask for. Well, here's the recipe basically for this particular dish, and we're going to take a look at it. We're going to make it. We're going to freeze dry and see how it works. The first thing I noticed about this, it has no meat, but we're going to try it anyway. We are going to make rainbow veggie stir fry with quinoa. Now I'm hoping I'm saying it right. Quinoa, it's one of those kind of hard to say words, but anyway, these are our ingredients. So first of all, we have a tablespoon of olive oil. We have 1 small red onion. We have 2 cloves of garlic. And then here we have a combination of minced yellow, orange, and red bell peppers. And then we have a small carrot that's julienned, 1 small zucchini that is also supposed to be julienne, but I quartered it accidentally. But anyway, so we have 1 small zucchini, 1 cup of broccoli florets, 1 cup mushroom slices, 1 cup baby spinach, half a cup of cooked black beans, half a cup of cooked chickpeas, and of course we have salt and pepper to season. And then we have 1 cup of thoroughly washed quinoa. So we're going to go ahead and prepare all of this. Now, in addition to this, we also have a sauce that we'll review later on. These are a lot of ingredients, and we're going to break down what I actually had in my pantry, what I had purchased, and what I had freeze-dried. As far as the fresh ingredients, I had the zucchini, I had the red onion, and I had the carrots. Those are all fresh. The items I took out of my freeze-dried pantry are going to be the 3 different colored peppers, the spinach, and the broccoli. Now, the peppers and the broccoli will rehydrate fairly decent, but the spinach, because it's a leafy vegetable, when it rehydrates, it's not real crunchy, I could say. It's more kind of looks like it's wilted. But these are things I had already in my freeze-dried pantry. These items right here came out of a can or out of a jar. So I have my minced garlic, I have my canned mushrooms, I have my canned chickpeas, which also are garbanzo beans, and I have my black beans. I have one issue with the chickpeas and the black beans. The recipe only called for half a cup of each, but yet I still have half a can of each of these. I really don't want to waste this food. I'm going to prepare the recipe as written, but if I was going to do this again, I'd probably add in the extra ingredients because I don't want to waste it. So what I will do is once the recipe is prepared and it's all cooked and finalized and tasted, before I freeze dry it, I'll probably add in the remaining ingredients so I'm not wasting any food. The quinoa, I don't know where it came from. My daughter, the vegetarian, supplied me with this. I've never had, well, let me put it this way. I have never knowingly had quinoa. I have no idea what it tastes like. It kind of looks like birdseed, but that's what the recipe calls for. And now for the sauce. So with the sauce, we have 3 tablespoons of low sodium soy sauce. We have 2 tablespoons rice vinegar, 1 tablespoon sesame oil, 1 tablespoon maple syrup, 1 teaspoon grated, just fresh, and 1 clove of minced garlic, which was bottled. One thing I'm also trying to do is get over my own bias. Not a big fan of the chickpeas, the garbanzo beans. I really don't like them that much, but I'm going to try it. The quinoa, I've heard so many jokes about it. I kind of have some hesitation, but we're going to try this and see how it goes. I have never cooked quinoa. Apparently it's similar to rice. So this is thoroughly rinsed. And I'm adding this 1 cup of quinoa to 2 cups of boiling water as instructed. And with just a little bit of salt. And cover it and reduce to low heat. And I'm supposed to do that for 15 to 20 minutes. For the sauce, everything just goes together. So we have 3 tablespoons soy sauce, 2 tablespoons rice vinegar, 1 tablespoon sesame oil, 1 tablespoon maple syrup, 1 teaspoon ginger, 1 teaspoon or 1 clove garlic. We're just going to mix all this up together, and this will be poured onto the stir fry. Next comes the stir fry. So we have our tablespoon of olive oil. We're going to go ahead and put in there. Let that kind of get all over the wok. And once it comes up to heat, we'll start adding ingredients. The first ingredients we're going to add is going to be the garlic and the red onions. We need to saute them for 2 or 3 minutes until they basically become caramelized. Then we're going to add the carrots, zucchini, mushrooms, broccoli, and peppers. And we want to cook these so they're tender but still kind of crisp for about 5 to 7 minutes. Next comes the chickpeas and the black beans. It says that spinach is added and cooked until wilted, but because this was freeze dried, it's already wilted just from the process. And this gets cooked for about 2 or 3 minutes. And the last thing we're going to add is the sauce. Now, I was thinking about this dish. I suppose this dish could be eaten just by anyone. The only thing that could be an allergy issue in here is the soy sauce. So I guess if you have an allergy to soy, this would not be for you. This is, I suppose, is vegan. There's no meat, there's no dairy. So I would imagine that this would be a universal food. Now, according to ChatGPT, this is supposed to be a perfect food. Now, this is not the end-all be-all to a perfect food. I'm sure there's other recipes out there that would supply all the calories and proteins that would be needed. So this is just an example. And now the big taste test. So here's our quinoa. It finally absorbed all the moisture. Kind of let's give this a little bit of a taste before I add everything else. It's like eating little teeny beads of something. Anyway, it's not really too bad, I suppose. And the stir fry. Okay, so this is supposed to be a perfect food according to ChatGPT. So here we go. Well, it's not bad. It kind of has a nutty flavor to it. I can definitely taste the soy sauce and the ginger, so it kind of has that oriental taste to it. The chickpeas, I think the thing I don't like about the chickpeas is they're kind of that mushy texture, but they're really not that bad. I guess the best way I can sum up this dish is it's a food I'm not accustomed to. If I was starving, yeah, I'd eat this. The vegetables, not too bad. It does have a lot of interesting flavors. So, here we go. This is the rainbow veggie stir fry with quinoa. According to ChatGPT, it's supposed to be a perfect food. So, I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, put it in the freeze dryer, and we're going to go ahead and freeze dry this and add it to my inventory. Since the first two recipes didn't go over too well, I decided one more time to ask ChatGPT one more question, and this is what I asked. I need a nutritious man food recipe that contains meat and lots of calories, fat for flavor, and easy to make. You know, a good old man recipe. And ChatGPT did not disappoint. And this is what it said. One recipe that might fit your criteria is a classic beef stew. Here's the recipe. Now, who doesn't like beef stew? Lots of meat, lots of fat, lots of flavor. So we're going to make this. Now, I've done beef stew in the past, and it's a great food to freeze dry. So we're going to do this recipe and see how it turns out. But I'm pretty positive it's going to turn out well. Before me are the makings of a hearty beef stew. We have 2 pounds of rump roast sliced up. We have 2 tablespoons of oil. We have a large chopped up onion, 2 cups of beef broth, 1 teaspoon down here of thyme. We have a can of diced tomatoes. We have 2 cloves of garlic diced. We have 4 carrots sliced up. We got 2 large potatoes diced up and 2 bay leaves. So we're going to combine this together and we're going to make a beef stew. We first need to brown the beef, and then we'll add the other ingredients. I got a pot on fire, and we're going to go ahead and heat up this vegetable oil, and then we're going to add the beef. The beef has been browned, and that completes stage 1. The next thing we're going to do is work on the vegetables. Next, we add the onions and the garlic. And we're going to saute these for about 5 minutes. Next, we're adding 2 cups of beef broth and the diced tomatoes, thyme, and an optional ingredient, 1 cup red wine, and 2 bay leaves. Bring this to a simmer, then we're going to add the rest of the vegetables. And then we add the carrots and the potatoes, and the beef goes back inside. And we're going to let that simmer for a while. So technically, this concludes our stew recipe. I do need to add some salt and pepper for seasoning. Now if you take a look at the liquid here, it's still kind of runny, and that's how the recipe calls for. But the last ingredient I'm going to do is I'm going to modify this just a bit to thicken it up. Now normally people will put a flour and water solution into this stew, but I can't do that because of the whole gluten-free issues here. So I have about a 1/4 cup of cornstarch and 1/2 cup of water here that we're going to add here as a thickening agent to make the stew just a little bit thicker here. And we're going to let this simmer and adjust it if we need to add more. But this, I can't say that this is a complete meal, but one thing I can say, it's going to be a delicious meal. We're going to have this for dinner tonight, and then the remaining amount, I'm going to go ahead and freeze dry it. The way I make pasteurized eggs is pretty simple. Well, first you need eggs, and I usually do about 12 at a time. So let's make some pasteurized eggs. I'd like to pose a question on America's egg supply. Do you really need to pasteurize eggs? Can you eat raw eggs? Well, according to the FDA, 1 egg out of 20,000 will have salmonella. I grew up on raw eggs, but those were pretty much chickens that were not factory chickens, and I never got salmonella. So whether you want to pasteurize your eggs for this recipe is your choice. Now, you can pasteurize eggs in the microwave. There's lots of ways on the internet on how you can pasteurize eggs. I have what's called a sous vide that can hold the temperature at precisely 140 degrees for about 3 to 5 minutes, and that's what we're going to do. I have my sous vide all set up. We're going to pop these into the sous vide, bring up the egg temperature for 3 to 5 minutes, and these will be pasteurized. So we're going to take the top off the sous vide. We're going to put our eggs in the hot water at 140 degrees. And we're going to set the timer for 4 minutes. It's been 5 minutes and my eggs are done. So this is 12 eggs pasteurized at 140 degrees. They're still in a liquid state. They're not chunky or cooked, but they're pasteurized. So we can add this to our eggnog. I wanted to ask ChatGPT one more question before leaving. And that question is, what is the best way to prepare for the zombie apocalypse? Now, this is kind of a tongue-in-cheek, but you'd be surprised at the answer it gave me. And you can go ahead and pause the screen as you read the answers. With all this being said, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I hope this was a little bit helpful in trying to find the perfect food to freeze dry that will sustain life for you and your family. I'd like to thank you for your comments, and please subscribe, and as always, go forth and freeze dry the world.